Well, here it is, the middle of June. I'm still working on some memoirs and I'm still trying to learn to walk again. It's been an awful few years with my falling down several times, breaking bones several times, and more recently, breaking my femur at the hip, causing me to go through several rehabs, one of which was in California, in a COVID ward because I was from out of state during a quarantine. And all I've had better experiences, including getting shot at in Santa Fe. But that was years ago. And I'm pretty much over that one. However, comparing a scary incident from the 70s, 60 years later or 50 years later, never was even considered back then that stuff like this would be going on. But anyway, the rehab center I spent in California has several criminal indictments pending, and I can see why people die in these places. In any event, I want to go back to, again, the changes in law. And what I've seen since Nixon, in particular, have been the processing or the promoting of agenda type laws. For instance, in the 60s and early 70s, the feminists took hold and decided to promote various feminist type crimes. Their political message was important. And I think for a number of years, the political message of women was ignored or downplayed, ridiculed, etc. And I don't blame women for being somewhat upset and tired of shit like that. However, things like that can be overdone. So I remember one case I had in particular. The defendant was a member of royalty of Southeast Asia, and he and his family had immigrated to the United States, along with several other people from that Asian country. The group that got here got politicized by various proselytizations from all kinds of various religious groups, wanting to save them and sway them from the evils of Buddhism, Confucianism, or whatever they said. They followed into Christianity, and there was all kinds of competition between the Mormon Church, the Catholic Church, Protestant churches, mainly Methodist, all for the hearts, souls, and minds of these immigrants from a war-torn country. So with this in the background, my client, young man, maybe in his middle to late 20s, runs into one of his fellow countrywomen and goes out on a date. This particular culture in Southeast Asia was a very old culture, and one of the tenets of the culture was that if you had sex out on a date, then it was tantamount to a proposition or wedding proposal. And the result was an engagement. So our client took this girl out. One thing led to another, and they ended up in bed. And afterward, she looks at him and says, "Does that mean we're engaged and got to get married?" And he looks at her and he says, "Oh no, that was in the old country. We're in America right now, and there's no way I'm going to marry you, but thank you for a good time. Well, of course, the various missionaries, feminist groups took umbrage with the guy's position and his degree of sexual exploitation. And the next thing you know, the police were after him and arrested him for rape. This was at the insistence of a lot of feminist groups that were anti-rape and wanted to publicize their position. In any event, we go to a hearing and it gets continued because there weren't any interpreters. The next time we get interpreters, but it was a Mormon missionary that volunteered to interpret. And the Mormon missionary was also part of the group that demanded that the accused be charged with rape. So we objected to that. After a third continuance, we finally got what I consider to be, or hope to be, a neutral interpreter. Well, after previous appearances, the so-called victim comes to court really despondent looking, tired looking, and everything else. She gets on the stand and has memory lapses, doesn't want to testify, obviously doesn't want to testify. And the specialist prosecutor that became part of the district attorney's office nationwide that year, trained to prosecute sex offenses and to take women's positions, told the judge and defense counsel that the woman was nervous and intimidated, appearing to testify against royalty from her country, and that she needed to be calmed down and needed a bit of a recess. So, since she was a prosecutor and had God on her side, she decided to violate some drug laws and give the witness a value. Well, pretty soon the witness started nodding off in the witness chair. So finally, paramedics came, they loosened her blouse, and attached to the bra strap was a note that said she'd taken a lot of sleeping pills because she couldn't face her family, couldn't face her friends and acquaintances in that particular culture after having testified or been asked to testify against their prince. So she decided to take the easy way out and OD'd on some medication. And the brilliant district attorney damn near killed her by giving more of the same medication to somebody that was ready to go under in the first place. But again, if you're a prosecutor, you have God on your side and you don't make mistakes. And any mistake you might make would be excused. However, that didn't help the little girl who had to take a lot of rehabilitation and a lot of psychotherapy to get over the trauma that was given her by the district attorney's office. The point I'm trying to make is there's different cultures, and if somebody is going to be an expert in women's studies and women's procedures, women's needs in court and things like that, they ought to study at least more than the country club, middle class female culture and understand there are others and that all cultures don't take the same view on sex as do suburban middle class women. And ignoring those differences could result in ultimate harm to someone. Another case I wanted to talk to you about was a referral from a minister in a city or town located on the Boulder-Weld County line. The referral was to an older gentleman who had been a farmer and horse breeder in the country, had several acres of good pasture land, several head of horses, and one daughter. Now, he was an old-time, old-fashioned father. And I was mistaken. It wasn't the farmer that was my client. He was the witness, the complainant, supposedly. But it was his daughter. And the minister referred the daughter to me, and I took her case. And here was the background of the case. She had taken care of her father for 25 years, ever since her mother had died. Her father was very demanding, very strict, very old-fashioned, and used to occasionally take a buggy whip to her to enforce discipline. Well, he was in, I think, 60s or 70s. He was up there in age. And he ran into this young lady in her 30s who moved in with him. And the next thing we know is she was getting a lot of property, getting a lot of gifts from the old guy, and occurrences such as this. Well, the minister got concerned, figuring that this was a money grabber and that she was going to try to get her hooks into him and fleece him, which had been known to happen occasionally. So he brought the woman to me, the daughter. I talked to her and took on the case. Well, the case evolved into a domestic violence case. The daughter threw a cup of coffee in anger when she was arguing with the father, and the woman living with the father, who was 20 years younger than the daughter, called the police. The police came out there and arrested the daughter for domestic violence, shouting and throwing something at her father. Well, it was obvious to everyone except for the DA's office and the police that this was abuse of an elderly person in order to get to his assets and rob him. But that didn't dawn on the specialists in domestic violence with the district attorney's office. They had one job and one job only, and that was to promote enforcement of domestic violence cases. So the end result is the daughter being totally pissed, being considered ungrateful, and retiring from her job. Retired with her husband to Branscombe, Missouri. As soon as the young lady that moved in with Daddy got control of the property, she left for a younger boyfriend, leaving Daddy a ward of the state. Now, I always wondered what kind of policy the district attorney's office would have to cause that to occur. But it had to do with agenda politics. It had to do with identity politics. The women's movement was more important politically than facts, justice, or a fair trial. And that's one of the things we have to look out for. In both those cases, a thorough investigation, without being hampered by agendas, would have had different results. You probably wouldn't have had an old millionaire rancher put in the poorhouse and a young immigrant woman getting put into hospital for an attempted suicide. There's all kinds of other different examples I could give, and I'll I might do this again if I get enough comments regarding this issue. I can think of at least 5 others. So if you want to hear more about this subject, which to me is very interesting, give me a call or write a comment. Also, if you're reading or watching this video, please tell others about it. I'd like to enlarge my circulation if possible. And you guys all have a wonderful summer. Thank you.